The first time I realized something was off was during a video call with a billion-dollar client, pitching a cybersecurity package I'd sweated over designing. Me, a freelance cybersecurity expert, living in Sunnyvale Heights, was mid-sentence about protecting their data when my screen froze. Not the harmless lag you can laugh off. No. This was the kind of glitch that knots your stomach like you've just been punched. The last image I saw was my own mouth on screen, gaping like a stunned goldfish mid-sentence. And this is how we stop intrusions. The client bailed after the third dropout. I didn't just lose a presentation. I lost a $50,000 contract I'd grinded months for. All because my home's power decided to play rogue right when it mattered most. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video. I bolted from my living room work nook, laptop in hand, already muttering tech curses only a nerd would get. Sunnyvale Heights was a suburb so pristine it felt fake, where people waved with plastic smiles and filed complaints behind your back. I'd picked this place for the quiet, but now I felt betrayed. I stormed outside, checking the electric meter, a thing I rarely bothered with, and saw it spinning like a mad top, the reverse current light blinking red like it was screaming something was very wrong. I stared at it, watching the numbers spike like a heart monitor for someone about to stroke out. Someone, or something, was sucking my power dry. I went back inside, checking everything, killed the AC, unplugged the laptop, even yanked the spaceship nightlight from my high school days, but the meter kept whirring like I was juicing the whole neighborhood. By nightfall, with a drizzle pattering down, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw on a raincoat, grabbed a flashlight, and dragged a rusty ladder from the garage. Climbing the roof in the rain wasn't my forte, but I couldn't sit still with a power bill that might knock me flat again. I scrambled up, nearly slipping on wet shingles, but finally made it to the top. I swept the flashlight across the roof, hoping for a tangled wire or a mischievous squirrel screwing with the system. But what I saw froze me. 3 big shiny solar panels, professionally installed, sat smugly on my roof, cables snaking down through the shingles. They weren't mine. I'd never signed up for anything green energy related, beyond tossing a beer can in the recycle bin to feel better. I knelt, touching a panel, feeling its faint hum as it worked. These were industrial grade, the kind big companies flaunt for environmental responsibility. I whispered, voice raspy with shock and rage. What in the freshly microwaved hell is going on up there? Rain slapped my face, but I didn't care. Someone had turned my house into a power station without asking. I thought of the Sunnyvale Heights Homeowners Association right away. Those clipboard-wielding creeps with fake smiles and scribbled warning letters. Only they'd have the gall to pull this. But why? And more importantly, did they think I'd let it slide? I climbed down, soaked and freezing, but a fire had sparked inside me. Losing that $50,000 contract wasn't just a hit to my wallet, it was a slap to my face, and now I knew the culprit wasn't fate, but whatever was siphoning power from my roof. Those solar panels up there weren't just an intrusion, they were a declaration of war. I knew who I was up against. The HOA crew, clipboard warriors, anonymous letter writers, people who thought a fake smile could mask any sin. But even in a control-freak haven like this, I didn't expect them to turn my roof into a public power plant. I toweled off, snapped photos and videos of the panels from every angle. Evidence is a guy like me's best weapon. Then I threw on a jacket, stuffed my phone in my pocket, and charged to the HOA office at the Sunnyvale Community Center, ready to make a scene worth a reality TV reunion. Linda Grayson, the HOA queen, sat behind her desk like it was a courtroom throne, not a table piled with expired mints. She wore a pastel sweater and the smug look of someone who thought she held all the cards. I barged in, phone raised, ready to unload, but before I could speak, Linda smiled, a calm before the tsunami smile, and said, "Oh Nate, we were going to notify you about our new community sustainable energy program. We've installed solar panels on key rooftops in the neighborhood, and you've been selected as one of our main hubs." Selected, I echoed, my voice pitching so high it nearly cracked. You mean when did I agree to let you turn my house into a free power plant for the neighborhood? Because last I checked, my roof isn't public property for rent. Linda stayed cool as a winter cucumber, sliding a paper across the desk like it was some ancient contract. I glanced at it, a generic notice, printed on plain paper, no postmark, no sign it ever reached me. Per Linda, it had been posted on the community board, which I later found was a dusty slab behind the HOA building, next to the dumpster. She said, in that tone that pegged me as an idiot, "Non-response is considered consent, Nate. Oh, you're a tech guy, you'll be fine." I stared at her, fighting the urge to fling the paper in her face. "Consent?" I growled. Where does that logic sit between hilarious and legally insane? Linda just giggled, like I was a kid overreacting to a lost toy. That's when two things hit me. 1. Linda had no clue what I really did for a living. I wasn't just a tech guy fixing neighbors' computers. I'd built network security protocols for government contractors, and now consulted for firms paying fortunes for a firewall. 2. I was about to become her worst nightmare. I walked out of the HOA office, a slow burn raging inside me. Not just from Linda Grayson's smug grin, or her thinking she'd won, but because I knew she'd just stepped into a fight she wasn't ready for. I lived in Sunnyvale Heights, where everything was staged like a perfect painting, but now I felt like a tool, exploited to power the neighborhood for free. Linda thought I'd grumble a bit, and let it go. She didn't know me, and I'd teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Back home, I didn't sit still. I needed to gauge how bad this was before striking back. I hauled out my laptop, plugged it into the big living room screen, and started digging. With experience designing network security for government contractors, I knew how to trace a trail, data or power. I checked the meter again, this time thoroughly. I hooked up a smart current monitor I kept in the garage, a toy from my gear tinkering days, and started logging data. The results on screen made my jaw drop. Over a dozen households were pulling power from my grid. Not just lights or fans, electric cars charging, ACs on blast, even some guy running an outdoor oven for Saturday ribs. I watched the usage chart spike like a heart monitor for someone about to stroke out, and I knew I was footing the bill for this whole damn neighborhood. I snapped pics of the meter, recorded the screen data, and ran out back with a flashlight to trace the cables from the roof panels. They weren't just routed through the shingles, they were wired straight into my main breaker box. A setup so slick, I almost admired it, if it weren't so brazen. I climbed the roof again. No rain this time, but still cold, and checked closer. 3 big panels, each with enough juice to power a few homes, hummed away, soaking up daytime sun and pumping it through my grid, for eastern Sunnyvale Heights to freeload. I sat there, on the roof, looking down at the lit-up houses below, and started laughing, a slow, incredulous chuckle that turned into something near manic. They really didn't know who they were messing with. I wasn't just a tech guy fixing neighbors' PCs. I was who companies called when their systems got hacked through a printer halfway across the world. Linda and the HOA thought I'd unplug some wires, whine a bit, and let it slide. No way. I climbed down, wet shoes squelching on the floor, and told myself, they want power. They'll pay for every watt, and I don't mean figuratively. But before striking, I needed more data. I set up a tracking sheet, how much power each household used, when, and how many kilowatt hours flowed through my grid. I even caught a guy down the street running a pool pump all day, probably to flex for TikTok pals. The whole east side of Sunnyvale Heights had turned my house into their free energy hub, and I was the sucker holding the bill. I stared at the numbers, then out the window where streetlights glowed over peaceful homes in the fading sun, and that manic laugh bubbled up again. They weren't just stealing power, they'd made my house their personal energy buffet, and I was the one paying. I stood, gripping the mouse so hard it nearly snapped. This wasn't just about money, it was about principle. Linda and the HOA had crossed a line, and I wouldn't just take back what was mine. I'd make them regret targeting me. I whispered to myself, they want to play. Fine. I'll show them what a real game looks like. The fire in me wasn't smoldering anymore. It was ablaze. But before striking, I needed a plan. Sharp, tight, and ruthless enough to make them pay. I couldn't just cut wires or send a complaint. That's weak. I needed to hit their wallets, their precious peace, and the dumb order the HOA bragged about. I called Ryan Torres, my new neighbor, a chill electrical engineer I'd met when he fixed a burnt outlet for me weeks back. Ryan knocked, beer in hand, and I dragged him into the garage. Now my makeshift command center with a laptop, whiteboard, and tangled wires. Look at this, I said, pointing at the power usage chart on screen. Over a dozen households sucking juice from panels on my roof. Electric cars, ACs, ovens, all on my dime. Ryan raised an eyebrow, sipped his beer, and chuckled. You serious? The HOA turned you into the neighborhood's backup battery. I nodded, jabbing at a panel photo. And Linda calls it a sustainable energy program. She thinks I'll let it slide because I'm a tech guy. Ryan shook his head. She doesn't know who you are, does she? You've hacked systems through printers. This crew's got no chance. We sat, and I sketched the idea, not just cutting power, redirecting it. If they want energy from my roof, I'll give it to them, but at my price. Ryan nodded, eyes lighting up. You mean sell it back to them? Exactly, I said, tapping keys on the laptop. I'll rig a smart grid controller, shunt the panel power to my own backup battery, then sell it through a shell company. They'll pay without knowing it's me. Ryan laughed hard. You're a smart bastard. But how do you keep them from suspecting? I smirked. Easy. I'll hack the panel's controller. They're cheap. Security's flimsier than toilet paper. I checked no encryption, no firewall. I'll monitor the flow, tweak it, and set up auto billing. Ryan slammed a hand on the table. Genius. But you'll need hardware too. I can rig a switch to split the current without torching your house. We got to work right there in the garage. I coded on the laptop. Ryan dug through his toolbox, pulling out a voltmeter and copper wire. I named the plan Operation Power Pinch. Petty, menacing and techie enough to sound like a spy flick. I didn't stop at payback. I wanted a game. I built a fake interface styled like a utility notice with a slapdash EcoPulse Solutions logo. I mocked up in Photoshop. It'd pop up when someone tapped the panel power, asking them to agree to terms. 25 cents per kilowatt hour after 10 free HOA daily. Who reads that stuff? They'd click agree without knowing they'd signed into my payment system. Ryan looked at me, shaking his head. You're evil, man. I love it. We tested the system late into the night, tweaking the current through an old bulb in the garage. When the light flickered on my command, I knew I was ready. But I had to be careful. One slip, and Linda would come back with her pack of lousy lawyers. Gotta be subtle, I told Ryan. At least at first. They won't know what's hitting them until the bills smack their faces. Ryan smirked. You're not just taking back power. You're turning it into gold. I'd love to see Linda's face when she gets her first bill. After Ryan and I perfected Operation Power Pinch in the garage, I couldn't wait any longer. Linda and the HOA had turned my house into a free power plant, and now it was time to make it a perfect trap. The plan was set. I'd redirect the solar panel energy from my roof into a private backup battery, then sell it back to them through the shell company, EcoPulse Solutions. They'd pay without knowing it was me, and I'd sit here chuckling as the bills hit them. This wasn't just revenge, it was a game, and I was the one moving the pieces. I started by firing up the system. That night Ryan and I sat in the garage, the laptop screen glowing on our faces like two conspirators in a spy flick. I hacked the panel controller, a cheap piece of junk I almost pitied its maker for. No encryption, no firewall, just a few lines of code and I owned it. I programmed it to shunt excess power into a backup battery. I'd snagged from an electronics store, an ugly brick, but strong enough to hold days' worth of juice. Ryan wired his ghost switch into my main breaker box, ensuring the panel current wouldn't torch my house. When I hit enter, the garage light blinked once, then steadied. Done, Ryan said, smirking. They won't know what's happening. Next came the trap, the fake EcoPulse Solutions interface. I designed it to look like a utility notice. Pale green dull font, a logo I slapped together in Photoshop. It'd pop up whenever a household tapped the panel power, asking them to agree to terms, 25 cents per kilowatt hour, after 10 free HOA daily. Who reads that stuff? I knew they'd click agree like sheep, and I'd have digital consent to bill them. I tested it on a small circuit in the house. The desk lamp flickered. The interface appeared. I clicked agree, and the system logged it. Perfect, I told Ryan. Now we just wait for the prey. The system kicked in faster than I'd thought. Within 24 hours, I'd logged 12 agrees from homes in eastern Sunnyvale Heights. I had addresses, usage stats and data. More than enough to start. I set up auto billing from an EcoPulse Solutions email, registered through a VPN, so no one could trace me. The first bills were small, just enough to avoid suspicion. $20 for this house, $35 for that one, $50 for the outdoor oven guy. I sent a $300 bill to the HOA, targeting Treasurer Victor Langston, a clumsy dude I'd met at a community meeting, who looked like he'd pay without blinking, and he did. Victor wired it right over. No questions. Ryan and I sat on the couch, staring at the bank alert, laughing till our sides hurt. This guy's a genius of cluelessness, Ryan said, raising his beer. Linda was next. I sent her an $80 bill. Not huge but enough to sting. I pictured her in her petunia-packed house, staring at it thinking it was a utility glitch. Sure enough, I heard through a neighbor that Linda had yelled at someone over the phone, demanding a billing fix. She didn't suspect me. Not yet. I smirked, tweaking a few more lines of code to sharpen the system. She'll figure it out soon, I told Ryan. But not now. Let her dig her own hole first. I didn't stop there. I added some chaos for fun. A little notice in the interface. Thank you for joining EcoPulse Solutions. Green energy, fair prices. It looked so legit I almost believed myself. The next bills went out the following day. $40 here, $60 there. Enough to pinch, but not spark a revolt. Victor paid another $150 for the HOA, and I started wondering if the guy ever read anything before sending money. Ryan looked at me, shaking his head. You're turning this whole place into your personal ATM. I've never been prouder. I was savoring my small victory with Operation Power Pinch. Bills from EcoPulse Solutions flowed steadily into my account. Victor Langston, paid like a brainless puppet. And Linda still had no clue I was behind it. Ryan and I lounged on the couch, sipping beers, giggling every time a new payment popped up. But I knew this game couldn't stay smooth forever. Linda wasn't the type to sit still when something shook her little HOA kingdom. And sure enough, she struck back. Sunnyvale Heights style. Loud, dramatic, and totally off base. It started when Linda got her $80 bill. I heard from a neighbor she'd stormed into the HOA office, waving it like a bomb threat, yelling at Victor that the utility's scamming us. Victor, with his special talent, just mumbled something about checking the budget, and kept paying without a peep. I figured she'd stop there. But nope. Linda called an emergency community meeting at Sunnyvale Hall, summoning everyone to address the energy issue. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I got the scoop from a gossipy neighbor that Linda had name-dropped me, calling me the enemy of green energy for daring to question her sustainable program. The meeting was a circus. Linda stood at the podium, in her pastel sweater, gripping a mic like she was addressing the UN. She declared the weird bills were an attempt to sabotage community spirit, pointing toward my house, accusing me of stirring trouble for challenging her at the office. I wasn't there to defend myself, but rumors spread like wildfire in Sunnyvale Heights. The next morning, I grabbed the paper and caught suspicious glares from neighbors, the kind you get when they think you just torched someone's place. The oven guy down the street even muttered something about troublemaker as he passed. I was getting frozen out, and I knew Linda was pulling the strings. But that wasn't all. One night, a storm rolled in, wind howling across the roof, thunder rattling the windows. I was watching Netflix when the whole block's power cut out. I checked the meter. It was dead still, no spinning. I thought it was just a regular outage. But the next morning, neighbors whispered that the panels on my roof had overloaded, shorting out eastern Sunnyvale. Linda jumped on it, spreading word that I was to blame, that I'd tampered with the system out of jealousy for the community's green efforts. I stood in my yard, staring at my roof, and chuckled. I hadn't even touched the wires. It was the HOA's cheap install job, but Linda had made me the perfect villain. The pressure started weighing down. Neighbors shunned me. Even the old lady who gave me cookies turned away when I waved. I felt like a criminal in my own neighborhood, but I didn't buckle. I knew the truth, and I had the data. My system was still humming. The backup battery was full, and money kept rolling into EcoPulse Solutions. Linda could scream all she wanted, but she had no proof, just baseless accusations, and a crowd buying her fake smile. Then a spark cut through the storm. Sophie Bennett, a single mom 2 houses down, knocked one afternoon. She held her power bill, up from $100 to $300. No panels on her roof. I heard Linda say, "You're causing trouble," Sophie said, voice wary, but curious. "But my bill's spiking too, and I don't get why." I smirked, waved her in, and pointed at the laptop chart. "Because the HOA's siphoning power from my place, and maybe your grid too. Linda doesn't know what I'm up to, but she's about to shoot herself in the foot." Sophie frowned, then nodded. "If you're right, I'm with you." I stood in the living room, watching Sophie leave, and felt the fire in me flare hotter. Linda wanted to isolate me. Fine, but she didn't know every move she made, just fueled me more. The EcoPulse Solutions system kept purring. The backup battery stayed topped off, and bill money still poured into my account. She could yell about green energy saboteurs all she liked, but I had the data, and now I had Sophie Bennett, an unexpected ally doubting the HOA's farce. I knew I needed more muscle to flip the board, and fate didn't let me down. While I sat in the living room, hammering code to fine-tune the system, a soft knock startled me. I opened the door, and there stood Evelyn Harper, my 2 doors down neighbor, always in a wide-brimmed gardening hat, rarely chatting with anyone. She held a glass of lemonade, smiling gently, and said, "I saw what they did to your roof. They tried it with me once too, but they don't know I worked for the CPUC." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, was the state's energy regulator. Evelyn wasn't just a sweet old flower lady. She was a former energy compliance pro who'd spent 30 years busting illegal setups. I let her in, and within 5 minutes, we'd turned the living room into a command hub. I showed Evelyn the panel pics, meter data, and usage logs I'd tracked. She sat, sliding her glasses down her nose, muttering, "Unpermitted install, National Electric Code violation, possible energy theft. This isn't just a breach, it's criminal." Her eyes lit up, like she was reliving her days chasing down bad guys at the CPUC. I smirked. Think we can do something with this? Evelyn gave a quiet, icy chuckle. I can draft a CPUC complaint they can't ignore, but I need more specifics. Got the panel specs. I pulled up the laptop, dumping all the data I'd collected. Current flow, wattage, even the panel model code from a tiny sticker. Evelyn scanned it, nodding, scribbling in an old notebook. Cheap units, substandard, she said. I've seen this before. Contractors cutting corners. HOAs clueless. If we prove they tied into your grid without a permit, Linda won't just lose her chair. She could face lawsuits. I laughed loud. You're a gift from the heavens, Evelyn. We sat there, like two bank robbers plotting a heist, dissecting every data point. Evelyn noted that wiring the panels to my breaker without consent violated private property law, not to mention making me pay for the neighborhood's power. She asked for more figures from the backup battery, how much I'd redirected, and I got it fast. When I showed her the tally, over 200 kWh, sold via EcoPulse Solutions, she slapped her thigh. Brilliant. You're not just taking back what's yours, you've weaponized it. I like you, Nate. I stood, pouring her more lemonade, feeling a fresh surge of energy. Linda thought she could isolate me, paint me as the bad guy. She didn't know I just scored an ally with legal fangs. Evelyn wasn't just a kind old lady, she was a CPUC vet, and she was loving this case like a kid with candy. I looked at her, then the data on screen, and whispered to myself, Linda, you just dug your hole deeper, and I'm the one shoving you in. With Evelyn on my team, I felt like I'd found a loaded legal gun. Linda might think she'd boxed me out, but she didn't know I was building a crew. Sophie Bennett questioning the HOA, and Evelyn ready to file with the CPUC. But I wasn't stopping at cash. I wanted chaos, to rattle Linda's little kingdom, and turn her green energy program into a nightmare. I decided to take Operation Power Pinch to the next level. Just selling the power back wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the inconvenience, to scream over things they'd taken for granted. I sat in the garage with Ryan Torres, who'd become my right-hand man in this mess. We need to make them panic, I said, tapping away at the laptop. I'll code a program to cut the panel power every 10 minutes during peak hours. Enough to flicker lights, stall electric cars, and kill ACs. Ryan smirked, pulling out his voltmeter. You want to turn the neighborhood into a horror flick? I'm in. I'll tweak the switch so it doesn't torch your house. We worked late, me coding a power cut loop into the panel controller. A simple but brutal script, dropping the current for 10 seconds, then kicking it back, over and over like a ghost in the system. Ryan tested the circuit, making sure only the panels took the hit, keeping my house safe. When I hit enter, the garage light blinked once, then steadied. Done, I said, laughing loud. Now let's see how long they last. But I didn't stop there. I added a little flair for drama. Every cutoff triggered a small speaker I'd wired to the panels, blaring a robotic voice. Power interruption. Please contact your provider. The effect hit fast. The next evening, peak hours, when folks fired up TVs, charged cars and cranked ACs, the neighborhood turned into a chaotic mess. I stood in my yard, hearing distant yells, kids shrieking as gaming consoles died, parents snapping as Netflix froze mid-movie, electric cars beeping like abandoned pups. The neighborhood chat I lurked in anonymously exploded. Anyone else losing power? My AC keeps cutting out. Bet a squirrel chewed the lines. I bit back a laugh, typing under a fake name. Maybe it's the curse of green energy. Linda know anything? Linda reacted just as I'd predicted. Panicked and off target. She blasted a community email, calling it an energy attack, by an unknown saboteur, blaming the utility company for unstable infrastructure. She threatened lawsuits, demanded an HOA probe, while I sat on the couch, sipping beer, watching my backup battery stay topped off. I turned to Ryan, parked beside me with his third beer. She thinks it's hackers from outer space. Ryan laughed hard. She doesn't know the hackers right here, drinking with me. I didn't let up. I hopped into other chat groups, stirring more. Under fake names, I planted conspiracies. Could be a government test. Heard solar flares do this. The oven guy down the street whispered in one group it was divine punishment for the HOA's arrogance. I nearly spat my beer reading that. Couldn't argue though. The more Linda tried to control it, the messier it got. She sent more emails, promising to switch providers and protect the community, but no one bought it anymore. Neighbors started questioning, if this is a green program, why's the power so bad? I'd turned Sunnyvale Heights into a madhouse with Operation Power Pinch. Flickering lights, chat groups erupting, and Linda Grayson running around like a headless chicken. The EcoPulse Solutions system kept siphoning cash from their wallets, and I had Evelyn Harper with her CPUC complaint in hand, plus Sophie Bennett starting to see through the HOA's farce. Linda thought she could crush me with accusations and isolation. Things hit a peak when the CPUC answered Evelyn's complaint. An official letter landed in my hands, demanding the HOA turn over all docs on their sustainable energy program. Contracts, permits, install logs. Evelyn chuckled as she showed me a copy. They don't have permits, Nate. I bet Linda didn't even know what the CPUC was until now. I smirked, knowing this was the knockout punch I needed. But I didn't wait for bureaucrats to move. I wanted the neighborhood to rise up, and I had a plan for that. I threw an informal meeting at my place, inviting Sophie and a few neighbors she'd rallied, folks whose bills had spiked with no explanation. I set up a big screen in the living room, laying out the data, pics of the panels on my roof, power usage charts, and EcoPulse Solutions, bills I accidentally flashed as proof the HOA was getting scammed. They're using my power to juice the whole block, I said, pointing at the numbers. And I bet your grids are hit too. Linda's not just stealing from me, she's stealing from all of us. Sophie stood, voice shaking with anger. My bill tripled, and I don't even have panels. We've got to do something. The group nodded, and I knew I'd lit the fuse. Sophie took charge, printing flyers with my data and plastering them around on bulletin boards, light poles, even stuffed in mailboxes. Linda reacted like a kid with crayons. She sent warning letters, accusing me of defaming the community and spreading private HOA materials. But she was too late. Residents started asking questions, and the pressure forced the HOA into a public meeting at Sunnyvale Hall, the first one open to everyone. I didn't get an official invite, but I didn't need one. I had bigger plans. Meeting night came, and I stayed home, watching through a tiny camera I'd rigged on my roof, perfect angle to catch Linda at the podium. She tried to stay calm, but her voice wobbled as she preached order and community spirit. Sophie stood, waving my flyer, and asked if this is a green program. Why weren't we asked? Why is Nate paying power for the whole block? Linda stammered, blaming unreliable contractors, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Evelyn, with the cool of a former CPUC pro, stepped up, flashing a copy of her complaint. The HOA's broken state law, she said. I move to vote Linda Grayson out right now. The vote was quick. Linda lost her chair in a landslide. Evelyn got tapped as interim president, and I sat on my couch, laughing loud as I watched it unfold on camera. But I didn't stop. I tore the panels off my roof that weekend. Ryan helped, us wielding screwdrivers and a saw, tossing each piece into the trash with a dramatic thunk. I filmed it, posted it to the anonymous chat, and it spread like a virus. I set up my own legit solar system in my yard, feeding clean power to anyone who signed up through EcoPulse Solutions, transparent pricing, no strong-arming. Over half the block joined in 2 days. Linda crashed hard. She sold her house a week later, moving truck rolling in at dawn, and she vanished without a goodbye. I stood in my yard watching it drive off, feeling sweet satisfaction. I'd flipped the board, not just took back my power, but turned it into theirs. I whispered to myself, "You wanted to play, Linda. I played, and you lost." After Linda left, the HOA changed completely. Evelyn, with her CPUC know-how, opened the books for all to see, scrapped leftover warning letters, and killed Linda's dumb sustainable energy program. Instead, she pitched a co-op deal. Residents could vote on tech upgrades, pick contractors, and suggest neighborhood fixes. Not perfect, but honest. For the first time in years, people felt they had a say. I stood in my yard, watching my solar setup hum, and told myself, I didn't just take back power. I changed this whole block. My win didn't stop there. The Sunnyvale Gazette, the local paper, jumped on the story. First a small piece about the guy who beat the HOA, but it blew up fast. I got emails from tech blogs, even a digital rights group wanting me for a conference. I turned most down, but the attention worked. It put Linda and the old HOA crew under a spotlight, keeping them from hitting back. One morning, I grabbed the paper, and caught the oven guy, who'd called me a troublemaker, waving hello, even offering coffee. When the grumpy couple down the street smiled too, I knew I'd won. For real. But the real prize came one evening, with a knock at the door. I opened it to a delivery guy, holding a small box, no return address, just my name printed clear. I brought it inside, opened it slow, and laughed loud at what I saw. A tiny solar panel model, engraved Power King, Sunnyvale Heights edition. No sender, no note, just the little trophy glinting under my kitchen light, like a reward for the weirdest fight I'd ever waged. I set it on the shelf, next to my cybersecurity books, and a pic of my plastic dog Bite in sunglasses. It fit right in. I didn't set out to be a hero. I just wanted what was mine. But looking back, I saw this wasn't just about power or bills. It was about boundaries, about standing up when someone thinks they can stomp your rights because they've got a clipboard and a title. Linda and the HOA always got away with it, but this time they hit me. A guy who knew his worth, with the skills and patience to outplay them, without shouting or stooping low. I just had to be smarter, and I was. The neighborhood never went back to how it was, but in a better way. Neighbors started respecting me, not just as the guy who fixed the power, but as someone who stood up to a system unchecked too long. I walked past where Linda's panels once sat, now a peaceful empty spot, and smiled. Her house sold to a retired tech prof, and his daughter, an online gamer. They moved in, saw my yard solar setup, and brought over a keyboard-shaped welcome cake. I laughed hard, saying, "You'll fit right in." Life settled into a new rhythm, quieter, calmer. EcoPulse Solutions now has over 30 customers, within 5 blocks, and I occasionally check the solar system, now doubling as a weather station, and bird perch. Linda's gone for good. Rumors say she couldn't get power hooked up at her new place, and was too proud to ask for help. I kept living, enjoying the peace I'd carved out, and the knowledge I'd turned a petty power grab into a neighborhood revolution. I whispered to myself, if anyone messes with my power again, they'll know who I am. And with that little trophy on the shelf, I figured I'd earned a title, not a hero, but the guy who made them learn a lesson. The story: HOA hooked solar panels to my grid, so I redirected power and sold it back to them. Mirrors a raw slice of life in the US today. The tension between individual rights and collective control, especially in suburban spots like Sunnyvale Heights. In a modern setup where homeowners associations (HOAs) often slap rules on residents to keep order or community value, like when Linda Grayson bolted solar panels to Nate's roof without asking, it lays bare the clash when personal rights get trampled under the guise of common good. Nate, with his tech skills and grit, didn't just reclaim his power, he weaponized it, selling energy back to the very people who stole from him. It's a snapshot of America. Tech and personal smarts can be heavy hitters against unfair systems. The takeaway here isn't just don't let anyone walk over you. It's a hard how to know your rights and use knowledge to guard them. When Nate teamed up with Evelyn Harper, a former CPUC worker, to file a complaint, he tapped US law, a system folks can wield if they know the ropes. Setting up EcoPulse Solutions to sell power back shows creativity in flipping a bad deal into a win. A very American vibe. Don't just resist, take charge. In real US life today, facing an HOA or any overreaching outfit, take a page from Nate, gather proof like his pics and data, find expert allies like Evelyn, and act sharp instead of just griping. Nate's fight reminds us, in a country big on personal freedom, you don't have to be a victim if you know how to play your own game. If you liked my tale of outsmarting Linda and reclaiming my power, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next high-tech takedown. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next video where I'll keep turning power grabbers into losers.